It was Friday, August 16th, 2024, when 60-year-old Denise Prudhomme scanned her badge at the Wells Fargo office in Tempe, Arizona, at 7 a.m., just like she had countless mornings before. But this time, she would never scan out again. This is the first of 3 true stories about workers who left for an ordinary day at work, unaware they would never make it home. 4 days after Denise scanned in that Friday morning, the 3rd floor of the Wells Fargo building had become something no office was ever meant to be: a tomb. Her cubicle sat tucked away from the main walkway, in what the company would later describe as a very underpopulated area. While hundreds of employees moved through the building each day, Denise remained invisible in her corner workspace, her body slowly decomposing in the August heat. The smell started subtle at first, that unmistakable foul odor that made people wrinkle their noses and quicken their pace past certain areas of the 3rd floor. Co-workers noticed it, discussed it in hushed conversations by the water cooler, but everyone reached the same logical conclusion: plumbing issues. In a corporate building this size, these things happened. Maintenance would handle it eventually. But maintenance never came, because this wasn't a broken pipe or a backed-up drain. Denise had suffered sudden cardiac death, her heart giving out due to scarring in the muscle tissue, a condition that can strike without warning. She had likely died at her desk sometime that Friday, maybe checking emails or reviewing reports, completely alone in her isolated corner of the building. Tuesday, August 20th, 4:55 p.m. That's when police officially pronounced Denise Prudhomme dead. She hadn't scanned out since Friday morning. 4 full business days, 96 hours. In a building with constant security, electronic surveillance, and hundreds of employees, a human being had rotted away unnoticed. A colleague finally found her while walking through the building. Imagine that moment, expecting to see an empty desk, maybe a forgotten coffee cup, and instead discovering what Denise had become after 4 days. The anonymous employee who spoke to local news captured the horror perfectly. That's the scary part. That's the uneasy part. It's negligence in some part. Wells Fargo's response was as corporate and hollow as you'd expect. They expressed their sadness, mentioned counselors for affected employees, and promised to review internal procedures. But the union representing Wells Fargo workers cut through the corporate speak with a chilling observation. Wells Fargo monitors our every move and keystroke using remote electronic technologies, purportedly to evaluate our productivity, and will fire us if we are caught not making enough keystrokes on our computers. However, Denise went unnoticed at her desk for 4 days. The contradictory nature of electronic surveillance versus an unnoticed death sheds light on the reality of what it means to be a worker at Wells Fargo. Think about that for a moment. A company that can track every keystroke, every bathroom break, every second of productivity, somehow failed to notice that one of their employees had been dead for 4 days. The technology existed to monitor Denise's computer activity, to track when she stopped responding to emails, to flag her absence from meetings, but no system was in place to check if she was actually alive. Denise Prudhomme died alone in plain sight, in a building full of people who smelled her decomposing body, but assumed it was just bad plumbing. Her death was the result of a sudden medical event, but the institutional failure that allowed her to remain undiscovered for 4 days was entirely preventable. A company obsessed with monitoring productivity had created a system that could track everything except whether its workers were still breathing. After hearing about Denise's 4-day discovery in that isolated Wells Fargo cubicle, do you think your own workplace would notice if you went missing for that long? Drop your answer in the comments below. But Denise's story is just the beginning of our workplace horror, because 2,000 miles away in Michigan, another worker was about to face an even more gruesome fate. Nicholas John Acker, a 36-year-old Air Force veteran and maintenance mechanic from Trenton, was found dead and trapped inside one of the facility's mail processing machines on Saturday, November 8, 2025, at the USPS Detroit Network Distribution Center in Allen Park, Michigan. His body had been there for 6 to 8 hours before first responders arrived. According to the medical examiner's report, Acker's body was found wedged between a guardrail and the conveyor belt of a sorting machine. The official cause of death was listed as mechanical asphyxia, when a heavy object compresses or crushes the body. Acker had been crushed to death by the very machinery he was trained to repair. When Acker didn't return home from work, his fiancée began to panic. She went to the Allen Park facility and waited outside the gates, watching emergency responders arrive before she was notified of his death. The two had gotten engaged just 10 days before his death. He'd spent 9 years serving his country in the Air Force, survived military service, only to be killed by a mail sorting machine in Michigan. What makes Acker's death even more chilling is what investigators discovered afterward. The machine involved had been the subject of a safety grievance fewer than 90 days earlier. A co-worker described a toxic environment in which management allegedly discourages shutting down machines, even for lockout procedures during repairs. We have protocols set into place, and most of those protocols are not followed, the worker said. The OSHA investigation revealed a common theme: failure to provide adequate training and utilize lockout-tagout procedures. These procedures are meant to prevent death or serious injury by preventing the unexpected startup or release of stored energy in machines and equipment. But at the Allen Park facility, safety had taken a back seat to productivity for years. The final insult came in the form of OSHA's response. After months of investigation into Acker's death, USPS reached an informal settlement with OSHA, bringing the fine amount to $26,481. $26,000. That's what federal regulators determined Acker's life was worth, less than the cost of a new car. His fiancée's response captured the rage felt by anyone who understood what that number represented. It is disgusting and infuriating that a company can hide behind a program like OSHA, a system that's supposed to protect workers and make sure people come home alive, only to walk away with slashed fines, meaningless citations, and zero real accountability. Acker's death was the direct result of a system that had systematically ignored safety protocols in favor of speed and productivity. But 6 months after Nicholas Acker was crushed to death in that mail sorting machine, another workplace was about to become the scene of an even more violent horror. This time, it wasn't mechanical failure or corporate negligence that would claim a life. It was deliberate, cold-blooded murder. On the morning of May 9th, 2026, employees arriving to open the Growler Guys, a beer garden and restaurant in Seattle's Lake City neighborhood, expected nothing more than the usual start to another weekend shift. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. Inside the building, one of their co-workers lay dead. Police were called to the scene shortly before 9 a.m. As officers secured the restaurant, friends and family members began gathering outside behind police tape, watching investigators move through the building and wondering what had happened during the night. The victim was identified as 25-year-old Kusaye Q. Margasa, a lifelong Seattle resident who had worked at the business the previous evening. Authorities would later confirm that he had died from a gunshot wound, but on that Saturday morning, almost everything else remained a mystery. Who had killed him? And why had it happened inside the restaurant where he worked? The people who knew Margasa struggled to make sense of it. Friends described him as charismatic, funny, and fiercely loyal. The owner of the Growler Guys remembered him as the type of friend everybody wanted to have, someone who always seemed to be smiling. Others described him as the glue that held entire friend groups together. Outside the business, flowers and candles began appearing near the entrance as the community mourned a young man whose life had been cut short. For many, the most unsettling part wasn't just the loss, it was the lack of answers. As detectives worked to reconstruct Margasa's final hours, they uncovered a timeline that would transform the case from a workplace mystery into something much darker. After finishing his shift, Margasa visited a nearby hookah lounge where he met a 20-year-old man named Lucas Logan and a woman. At some point later that night, all three returned to the Growler Guys after business hours. What happened next would become the focus of a homicide investigation. According to prosecutors, Logan shot Margasa in the back of the head inside the restaurant. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't a random act of violence committed by a stranger. According to investigators, the person responsible had been inside the building with him. The deadly encounter unfolded not in some isolated location, but inside the very workplace where Margasa had spent countless ordinary shifts serving customers. Police eventually arrested Logan and charged him with first-degree murder. During court proceedings, he pleaded not guilty, with his defense arguing that the shooting occurred in self-defense. Prosecutors disagreed, arguing that the evidence pointed to a deliberate killing. Just like Nicholas Acker before him, Kusar Margasa left for what should have been an ordinary day at work. He never made it home. 3 workers, 3 different deaths. They all share one terrifying truth. The place where you spend most of your waking hours, the place that's supposed to provide for your life, can just as easily become the place where your life ends.